Greetings and salutations, friends. If you have been watching, hopefully you have been with us for some time. If not, you're just joining us in this installment of my story about the life and times of the Caribbean Sea. I will be speaking to Sean Morton. I don't know Sean or Sean. I don't know. I'm not Irish. I don't understand why they spell Sean and pronounce it Sean, but that's the English for you. But anyway, more importantly, Mr. Sean Morton is with NOAA, and he's going to be speaking to me from Key West. That is where we get the beautiful lime key pie. We won't be talking about pie. Instead, we will be talking about fish or whatever he cares to talk about, letting us know what is Noah doing. So greetings, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing well, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Is it Sean or Singh?
It is Sean.
Okay, there we go. That's the Irish. Now,
spelled correctly.
So you are in NOAA, and when I was digging around research, I found out that NOAA is doing a marine fish sanctuary, am I correct, in the Florida Keys. And the Florida Keys is somehow part of the Caribbean Sea, even though it's not really the sea. Could you explain to me, first of all, how it becomes part of the Caribbean large marine ecosystem? That's a proper professional term.
Yes. So the Florida Keys is a national marine sanctuary, which means it's a marine protected area that is part of a system of national marine sanctuaries and marine protected areas around the country. The entire Florida Keys marine sanctuary constitutes about 2,900 square miles of water that include all of the waters around the Keys, and there's about 1,700 islands that make up the Florida Keys, and it includes all the waters, the coastal fringing mangroves, the seagrasses that extend from Florida Bay, and then of course the coral reef ecosystem that goes from Biscayne, which is just off of Miami, all the way out to the Dry Tortugas and the Dry Tortugas National Park, and that's a little over 200 miles of coral reef. So all of that is a marine protected area. It's a very special place because it is on the northern extent of, and you got it right, the larger Caribbean large marine ecosystem. We're in the larger Greater Caribbean Basin. We're at the northern end, and that means we are influenced by the Gulf Stream that travels all throughout the Caribbean, around Mexico, and around through the Gulf of Mexico, and then through the Keys, and then up the eastern seaboard.
So when you say Gulf Stream, so many things that come up in my mind immediately. When you say Gulf Stream, I hear this term all the time. Is it an air stream or a water stream? First of all, yeah. It's in the sea, right?
It is in the sea. This is the current that travels from South America up along the coast of Central America, around the Yucatan, and then up through the Gulf of Mexico, and then back down around the Florida Keys, and then up the East Coast.
So the Gulf Stream does something like a U turn on its side, kind of.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that Gulf Stream is critically important for us because that's what brings a lot of the larvae from fish that are spawning, lobsters that are spawning, whale sharks, all the things that you typically find in the Caribbean Basin. Those move up and through that Gulf Stream and around the Florida Keys. Our most important commercial fishery here is the spiny lobster, and those lobster that we have here, those larvae, the genetic studies show that those come from the Caribbean, and so we get those spiny lobsters from the southern countries.
You just said a very important word to my ears: lobster. Now, I've read about the Florida Keys, and I've been to Florida many times, but I've never actually thought about them as a place to go. So tell me, what is it like in the Florida Keys? The whole place is a sanctuary anyway. Is life there just about watching the fish? Are people allowed to even fish or do any lobstering or whatever we call it?
You're absolutely allowed to fish. We do have some special marine reserves where things are off limit to taking fish, but the vast majority of the Florida Keys are open to fishing. The vast majority is open to spear fishing, but it's also open to both recreational and commercial lobstering. Uh, and so we have both a strong recreational lobster fishery, particularly right when the fishery opens at the end of July, early August. It is a large amount of folks that come down as tourists, and they go out looking for those lobster, and it's a lot of those lobster come out during that period. That's also the start of the commercial fishery, and that runs pretty much all through the winter months. And again, that's our number one commercial fishery. And so lobster is just critical to the Florida Keys. But people like to also just come and dive and snorkel. It's the dive capital of the world. They call it the sport fishing capital of the world. So all these things it's a marketing
No,
thing because our number
I,
one.
I am going to have to challenge you right there.
Uh,
Because if any other Caribbean country hears you say that Florida Keys is a dive capital of the world, you're about to start what you call a ruckus. Now, if
oh,
you're living on the Florida Key, you probably have a very Caribbean personality. I don't care where in America you come from. If you're living on an island, you are supposed to have a Caribbean personality. So you know you can't say stuff like that and get away with it, right?
well, this is I'm strictly quoting our tourism officials who will market it any way possible. But there is it's the community of Key Largo markets itself on its signs as the diving capital of the world, and I think depending on where you like to dive. I'm originally from California. I mean, some people will say that Monterey, California, is the dive capital. You talk to Australians, they're going to say the Great Barrier Reef is the dive capital of the world. So it's
Exactly.
it's wherever you are, and wherever you enjoy it.
Exactly. So you see, it's really, I mean, the minute I started talking about the ruckus, my camera thing went all array. If people are watching, they probably think I've been drinking, it's swaying like I'm on a boat. But anyway, so are you a marine, let's say, environmental? Are you a biologist, a geographer? What is your specialty?
So I am the superintendent here at the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. My background is actually natural resource economics. So I came from the social science world, and but I work very closely. We have a large team of natural resource biologists that do great work monitoring all of the fish, all of the coral, the seagrasses. It's a huge partnership in the Florida Keys amongst the federal government, the state government, the local government, and all the universities. We have people come from all around the world to study the coral reef ecosystem, the different natural habitats, the varieties of fish here in the Florida Keys, and we work with everybody.
So I want to come ask a very specific question because one of the reasons why we're celebrating UN World Ocean Day with these stories about the life and times of the sea because I am not an environmentalist, and I read somewhere that the sea is responsible for our oxygen that we breathe. And then I realized, oh my God, even though I'm not really an environmentalist, I ought to care about the sea. And then I also found out that the coral reefs are in dire straits. And if the coral reefs die off, then I mean a lot of things are going to kind of die off. And if you could really escalate it like a apocalypse story, it could be our apocalypse. So how are we doing really in terms of uh, beginning to harness the sort of caretaking skills that we have to, let's say, slow down or improve the rate of death of the coral reefs that we've been hearing so much about? How are we doing? How will you score us? And I say us, I mean not just NOAA, but us as a people in the Caribbean region. How are we doing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors at work and in play that are affecting our coral reefs, but the coral reefs are definitely in trouble. There has been a lot of impacts from water quality issues, runoff from land-based sources of pollution. There's been impacts from just general discharges into the ocean and marine debris. There's been impacts from overfishing. And throughout the Caribbean, in the United States, we're getting, I think, a better handle on that. And then there's the global threat of climate change and warming waters. And the warming waters put more stress on the corals, where the higher chance of them bleaching, a higher chance of them catching diseases, and then there's also that can just lead to death. We've also had problems with herbivores, the fish and things like sea urchins that clean the algae and eat the algae off the coral reef. And that's very important so that the corals can feed properly, they get the right amount of sunlight. So there's a lot of things affecting the coral reef. But the good news, I think, is that there's a lot more awareness around the world, really, about what those impacts are and how we can best address them. Certainly, local things that we can do to improve water quality are being done almost at every location. There's obviously a lot more work to do. I think we're getting a better understanding of overfishing, particularly of herbivores in areas where we may be fishing for things like parrotfish that eat that algae. Unfortunately, in the Caribbean, we had a massive die-off of the sea urchin, which is so critical back in the early 80s. That was a disease. That was a disease outbreak. No one knows the exact disease and reason that happened, but that was in 1982 and 1983.
Wow.
It started in the Panama Canal area and then rapidly spread throughout the Caribbean, including the Florida Keys. And that had a significant impact on the overall health of the coral reef and its resilience and ability to deal with other stresses like overfishing or heat stress that would come from warming waters.
Okay, so I want to go back to a basic question, because even me, although I think I've read a lot, I still don't have a clear picture. So when I hear a coral reef and I hear bleaching and I hear living, is a coral reef more like a plant, or is it more like an animal?
A coral itself is an animal. It is not a plant. It is a living creature, and so each of those little coral polyps are animals, and those need to feed. And they need to grow, and so those and if those are impacted either by people touching them or they're being maybe smothered by algae, they can't feed. And there's also the photosynthetic part of they can't get sunlight, which they need to be able to process those kinds of food. So it is definitely a living creature, and it's important. It's not just like a rock that's out there. It is a living creature that needs to feed, needs the right amount of sunlight.
It's a living creature that looks like a rock.
Yeah.
Because I'm serious, because it makes you just have more sense of awe of how much we know, how much we don't know, and how much we still don't know that we don't know, because we really don't know why the sea urchins died off, as you say. So as I'm hearing you, all sorts of things are flashing through my head that they're saying, wow, there is a project for a bright young research student. Maybe we can have a new type of sensor that's just tied to sea urchin study, for example, that now with all this Internet of Things, citizens can become scientists and guardians of the sea. In the same way, we have people doing work around, the stars and astronauts, because there has to be a way for us to amplify, if you will, more people getting more aware of what we can do as ordinary people to help. Because I mean, I'm not going to be a scientist, but if we need people to say do things like watch, if there's a camera, let's say, or many thousands of cameras on the sea, and people have to volunteer to watch, for example, and someone say what they see that looks different, these might be ways we can think about differently to help bring the Caribbean Sea community into what I'm calling a Caribbean Sea fan community. So we can become like a sea fan, because I found out that a sea fan was actually a living colony of things like animals. I don't know, insects or animals. What is a sea fan? Is it an animal or a plant?
A sea fan is also a coral, but you're actually exactly right. It's a sea fan can be its own little ecosystem with the number of animals that rely on that as well. You know, you'll see animals aggregating around coral reefs. You know, be them soft corals like sea fans or the hard coral. You know, like a branching coral or something that you would see on a fringing reef that's growing a lot in a hard way. So all of those can be ecosystems, you know, upon themselves. But you're absolutely right, and that there's a lot of opportunity for future science, particularly in the field of restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
and, and, and there's a
Yes.
lot of different types of corals and learning how to grow them and be able to successfully put them out into the wild so that they can grow and spawn and grow larger, as well as things like sea urchins. And that has been a challenge in understanding what caused the original disease. But I think that's another area where restoration ecology has, you know, a huge future and could be, you know, our best hope in trying to determine what types of things can be put out there to restore the oceans, the reefs, and then also how can we make them more resilient to the stresses that we're also trying to reduce, warming oceans or water quality problems from discharges from land. So I think there's a huge opportunity for study, and I think it would be it'd be a boon for everybody if we could get a lot more people interested and helping out with those types of activities.
Well, I think that's a good place to end this conversation. There's so much more we could talk about. I certainly have learned a lot. So it was a thank you, Sean Morton, for taking some time off from your schedule to speak with us.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. It was my pleasure.